Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these two little guys right here. These are the Civivi knives McKenna, two different versions of the same exact knife. First off, though, I want to thank very much my buddy Nehemiah over at the Metal Effort channel. He's a local guy, and, so he and I will meet up and chat about knives every so often. He actually loaned me this guy to take a look at, and I was quite impressed. In fact, I carried this. It was just like, oh, that's good. So he gave me the initial impetus, so to speak, for the review, and then a couple of people reached out to me and said, Nick, you got to try the Damascus one. It's even smoother, and indeed, it kind of is. And so I figured I'd want to give that a shot as well. So thank you to my patrons for allowing me to give that a shot, just for the purposes of the review. So that's good. Next thing, let's do a size comparison. These are not large knives, and I'll stick to the Damascus one for the moment. What we can see here is that this guy is around the same size as the Ontario Rat number 2. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2, and the Delica is around here somewhere. Here we go. And so we can see here that in terms of sharpened blade length, we're actually not that far off of the PM2, but overall blade length, we're closer to the Delica here. Not a very, very large knife here particularly, and then actually a couple of other small knife comparisons. Here it is against the Spyderco Dragonfly, which it is actually bigger than, certainly in terms of the blade, maybe if not in terms of overall size. And then here it is against another front flipper in the smaller range. This is the Olamic Cutlery Busker, one of my very favorite front flippers, as well as the Booz Blades Smoke, which, again, these are pretty well-known front flipper sorts of affairs. So, there you go. Next thing, this guy is a Civivi brand knife. Civivi, for those of you not necessarily in the know, is the budget brand of Wee knives. They are an overseas maker. They are out of China, and they do a fair amount of really nice work. I've reviewed a couple of their things on the channel before. Perhaps the one you've seen most often is this guy. This is the Praxis. But these are a very, very different knife out of Civivi, and I'm actually kind of pretty impressed by it. So anyways, let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting little knife right here. So on the good side, to start with, it carries very well because they are freaking tiny. I mean, this is a very, very small knife. I can put this guy up next to the Spyderco Delica, and what we can see here is that it actually has, it's smaller than the Delica in pretty much every relevant dimension. It's about this, maybe a tiny, tiny bit thicker, but still, it's a very, very small knife. And especially given that the blade length on this guy is not particularly long, coming in uncontroversially under 3 inches. This guy works out pretty well. We're coming in here at 1.77 ounces for about 3 inches of blade, super lightweight as well. And given the fact that it's got both a nice deep carry pocket clip and that it is ambidextrously carryable, that's a beautiful thing. I can't argue with that at all, so that's good. Next thing, because it is under 3 inches, it's going to be legal in a lot of places, and it's also going to be unintimidating. This isn't really a knife that's going to scare a whole lot of people. I mean, certainly there are people who will be able to be scared at anything, but at the same time, this is not going to be this has a high lunchroom acceptability factor, I think, generally, and so that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, like I said, this guy is very lightweight and, very compact, generally speaking, which I think is a helpful thing. But particularly just the way that this guy disappears in the pocket is absolutely great. And so that's good. Next thing, this guy has a Damascus option. Now, I may slip at some point and say the word Damasteel. Damasteel is a type of Damascus steel. This is actually a Damasteel brand, Damasteel. But this is this right here is a different kind of Damascus. It is a pattern welded steel, meaning that it is comprised of more than one steel that have been welded together in a sort of attractive pattern here. And in fact, if you watch my disassembly, and you can just barely see in the spine of this knife, you can see the little lines that show where those layers are welded together. But it is composed of more than one steel. It is actually pattern welded. It is not just laser engraved on there. It is not, and they are actually a stainless style steel. The information I've been able to find makes it sound like it's based on 9CR18 MOV, but nevertheless, I like that they offer this, and especially at this kind of a price point, it's kind of cool, and they've done it well. I mean, they've polished it nicely enough here, and it's a very smooth knife. They've done the important things, like, for instance, not etching the area where the detent ball rides. They've done a pretty good job with the Damascus steel here, and that's great. Next thing, ergonomically speaking, this is weirdly good. It works very well in the hand, at least for my relatively small hands, in that you're not very far away from the blade here. It just fits very well in the hand, generally speaking. The clip, actually, although it's a little bit prominent, it is actually, I don't know, it jumps up into the right area. It adds a little bit of bulk to the hand where the knife needs it. Ergonomically speaking, this is actually a win, and it also is very good for other kinds of cutting as well. This is sort of a Warncliffe style blade, and it works very well for these kinds of utility cuts, which I think is great. That's good. Next thing, this guy is clearly still a design piece. This is a design by Elijah Isham. Actually, they haven't put his maker's mark on the Damascus one, which is kind of a good idea in a lot of ways, just because it, would just take away from the pattern. But here we go. This is Elijah right there. You can see his maker's mark. Nice guy. But anyways, he is a designer who's done a bunch of crazy stuff for a bunch of, well, crazy people, but a lot for we as well. And this is one of his pieces, and actually it is pretty clearly one of his pieces. It fits in line with the Plethyros, the Anthropos, that sort of thing. Those are some of his other knives. Well, those are both Civivi, but he's done a bunch of stuff for we as well. But it is still clearly a designed knife, right? It's not a ho-hum boring sort of thing. There aren't that many knives that look exactly like this one, and especially once you throw the Damascus on there, that's pretty solid. But it is also a very practical knife, and in some ways this feels a little bit more everyday friendly than a lot of his designs can. Although, again, that's a little bit unfair, because a lot of his stuff is good and everyday. It's just weird every day, too. So, there you go. Next thing, pricing-wise, these are good to go. For the D2 bladed version, this guy right here, you are looking at a $70 price tag, which I think is actually quite good. And you are looking at only $90 for the Damascus blade knife. Now, that's really good. Very, very seldom in the world are you paying $90 for a Damascus bladed knife that is worth a damn. You can find all sorts of Damascus style steels that are, for 30 or 40 bucks out there, but they tend to be two bad steels mixed together. They tend to be non-stainless, and they tend to be very poorly made pieces overall. This is actually one of the lowest barriers to entry for a good Damascus style steel that I'm aware of out there, and the fact that it also happens to be attached to a knife that is profoundly excellent is a beautiful thing. So the prices on these guys are very good. $90 will buy you a lot of knife. There are a lot of really nice pieces in that price range. But this is a good choice. And especially with that added fanciness, oh yeah, that's a thing. Then finally on the good side, and this could be the great, I went back and forth a little bit, is the action. This has an amazing action. It is an excellent, excellent front flipper. So the way that this guy deploys is unlike a lot of knives these days, which have a flipper tab in the backside here. It has a, like this guy here is a back style flipper tab. This is the Hogue Micro Flip. This guy here has a front style flipper tab, where you just put your thumb here, and then basically you kind of open it like you would a lighter, where you just pop it back there. Well, I guess you could open a lighter that way if it's a lighter. Anyways, I digress. So you just kind of pop it open like this. And the thing is, they have tuned this very, very well. It has just the right strength of a detent there, which is good. You can also pinch it open if you're around somebody who's, a little bit more scared than usual. That's a great thing. And it's super easy, as it has a fair amount of prominence up above the pivot. That's another good predictor of front flipping action, is how high is this piece of pivot here, or is this piece of blade tang, that is, up above the pivot. This is the Alamic Busker, which is another of my favorite front flippers, which has a very nicely tuned action there. So, this is an excellent front flipper. Both of these guys are absolutely stellar. They're very easy to use. You don't have to think about it. Some of them can have almost finger-breaking pressures required to get it out there. And the other thing is that you'll notice is that the flipper tab doesn't drop below the handle until the very end. So it's very easy to do this reliably. You're not going to miss a flip if you die, for instance, if you fall off the tab here. And some people have shown, results by doing it, this way and other ways. There are plenty of ways to open these kinds of knives, but, the action on them is great. It's just tuned beautifully to be a front flipper. And so to me, all of that is the good, is that the action is really amazing. The prices are solid. It's still clearly a design piece by a very well-known designer these days. It is weirdly ergonomic. I do like the Damascus option very much. It's amazingly lightweight. It's going to be fairly legal, and it carries exceptionally well. On the great side, though, to me, are the blades. Look, knives should cut. Fundamentally, that's their thing, and these guys cut. Oh my God, do these cut. Because to start with, you get two different kinds of blade here. You can get D2 steel, which is a solid steel. It works pretty damn well. And you can get D2 steel here, or you can get this Damascus that we've already talked about here. But regardless of the steel that you're getting, you are getting a relatively thin blade here. If we compare this here, we see that this blade is actually thinner than the Spyderco Dragonfly. Although, given the grind is shorter, so yeah. It's thinner than the Spyderco Delica. It is much thinner, for instance, than the Alambic Busker, even though the blade lengths are relatively similar. But as a result, this guy cuts like freaking crazy, because it comes also down to a very thin edge. These are very, very nice little cutting knives. There is a lot to be said about this guy. I like this guy a lot in terms of cutting. And the fact that you have this nice Warncliffe-style blade is very utilitarian. This is a great tool for opening things, for cutting things. Every day I carried this, it was like, yeah, that's a solid piece. And so to me at least, what's great about this guy more than anything else is that it's a great knife for cutting things. And that's not something that you reliably get anymore because the world is freaking insane. So to me at least, that's what's great is the blade, although the action could easily have been great as well. On the bad side, to start off with, of course, this is going to be a little small for some people, and especially the handle itself. This is a relatively small, fidgety knife. And, you know, I can see if you have gigantic freaking meat paws, this is not going to be what you're going to want to use and carry for the rest of your life, right? That's okay, but you want to keep that in mind. There is a very real chance that this could be a little small in the hand for some people out there in the world. Next thing, it bothers me a little bit that there's not much more transparency about the components of the Damascus. You know, one of the nice things about, for instance, the Damasteel, the company Damasteel, is that they provide a great deal of information about the components of that steel, right? Because a Damasteel, or I'm sorry, a Damascus-style pattern welded steel is always going to be multiple steels that are kind of convolved with each other in a pretty way. And so it's nice to know the chemical components, like, oh, these are both powder metallurgy steels. Oh, this one's stainless, this one. And so the fact that we only know, you know, I looked on, and the only way I know any of this is by looking at forums. And so, you know, take this with a grain of salt, but one of Wee's distributors had mentioned on Blade forums that this was 9CR18 MOV based, and it performs about like 440C. That honestly seems about right. It's taken some scratches. I mean, you can see a little bit of scratching's gone on here. But nevertheless, I mean, that seems about right, but I really do kind of wish we had a little more detail. The way they put it is that they're worried about other companies ripping them off for their process there, which is, well, kind of entertaining, but still, I get it, but I wish that were more open, because it would just be easier to say, oh, okay, if this is 9CR18 MOV coupled with, you know, 12C28N. I don't believe that to be the case, by the way. I have no reason to say that, but it would be better, it would be easier for us to know more about it if there was more transparency there with the Damascus. Not a huge deal, but it is something I hope changes in the future because, well, let's face it, the first time these get out into the wild, competitors can start testing and find that stuff out. Next thing, I do wish that the Damascus one were dressed up a little bit more. I mean, even if it were done in a nice carbon fiber or something like that, I feel like it would add a little bit something to this guy over the Black G10. I appreciate that they're keeping the price down. And in some level, I'd be happy to see them do like the Damascus coupled with Black G10 at this price, and then maybe with carbon fiber for $10 more, maybe a wood handle or something like that. But I feel like that would be a really nice thing to dress this up a little bit more and would bring it even further into the domain of the general person's folder, you know, the classy carry sort of approach where I think it already lands, right? Having a dressed up version of this with a wooden scale or a nice micarta or something like that could be really appealing to a lot of people. But I think this is also going to be a very nice knife for rescaling. I think it'll probably be pretty straightforward for a lot of custom scale makers to make something that would fit these knives and that could do really, really pretty work very, very quickly. So I would look forward to a renaissance, you know, presuming these remain in circulation, which they damn well better, Civivi. I look forward to a vigorous aftermarket scale market to make the rest of the knife match this Damascus blade. Anyways, there you go. Next thing, this is a front flip only knife. I mean, you can pop it open with 2 fingers there. It's a little tricky, but you can definitely do it. But by and large, this is front flippy only. There's not a thumb stud or anything like that. So if you don't like front flippers, well, you're not going to like this. Although I'll give you, this is a much easier front flipper than most. So that's good. And then finally, on the bad side, maybe the worst design flaw I can come up with here is that these screws here stick up a fair amount underneath the clip. So it has a tendency to get caught right about here in the pocket rather than sliding all the way to the end. Look, this is the level I'm reaching for here. This is a good knife, but still, yeah, if they could use flush screws, that'd be nice. Do I have one nearby that's doing that? I must, but I do not. Okay, well, either way, there are a bunch of knives out there that do that a little better, so keep that in mind. Anyway, so to me, all of that is the bad. It's got the screws under the clip there. It is a front flipper only. I wish they did have a dressed-up version of the Damascus one. There is very little transparency about the components of that Damascus steel, and it is a little too small for some people. There's nothing ugly here, so final conclusion, look, this is a wonderful little knife. I'm actually really, really impressed with this guy. It is shockingly good as a front flipper. I mean, there are a lot of front flippers on the market these days. That's become really a thing, but this is one of the best ones out there in terms of just everyday usability, right? It's also very nice in the hand. It's got a neat little design, and it's a good utilitarian blade. They've coupled it, too, with the option to go with this Damascus, which I don't think they needed to do at all, but I think is a really brilliant move, right? And so, yeah, it's got a couple of downsides. It's going to be a little small. They were a little low in detail for the Damascus. It's a front flip-only knife, and there were screws under the clip, but you know what? Honestly, this is really good. This is shockingly good. This is absolutely 100% a gem. This is a really, really nice piece, and it's a piece that I can recommend to a bunch of people. If somebody comes up to me and says, Nick, I want a knife under 3 inches, this is not a bad choice to give them. Nick, I want a knife that's very lightweight. This is not a bad choice to give them. Nick, I want a front flipper that's relatively small. This is not a bad choice to give them. Nick, I want a slicey little knife. Nick, this is not a bad choice to give them either. Or if you're even looking for your first pattern welding, I mean, if you're looking for the first Damascus-style blade like this, and you want to do something of decent quality, this is not a bad choice to do it. And as a result, this is a knife I can recommend on a bunch of different fronts. I've been a fan of the Civivi lineup before, but this is maybe my favorite thing they've done by a fair margin, right? Not only does it have Elijah Isham's design, and he is a good designer. I like Elijah's work a lot, and especially when he's doing something that's very EDC-focused and a little bit less out on the lunatic fringe of art knifery. And again, Elijah, with respect, he tends to create something really compelling, but this guy is just a confluence of a bunch of really nice things. It's got the great action. It's got the great, build quality overall, which I didn't really talk about, but they have dead freaking center and whatnot. It's got the nice materials with Damascus going on here. It's just got a whole bunch of really nice things going for it, and all flowing together into something that is both really, really good and really different. It's different than a lot of what else is out there, and that's just a beautiful freaking thing. And it's compelling from a bunch of perspectives, and something that I would recommend from a bunch of different perspectives, and offers a pretty damn good value all to boot. So I am really, really, really impressed with this knife, more so than I really anticipated being. I saw it like, oh, another small front flip, and no. This is a really good knife. This is a very, very strong contender for Budget Knife of the Year, and it is just overall a very, very impressive work. So well done, Civivi. Well done, Elijah, and I hope they're proud making a knife as good as this one. I'm sorry, McKenna knife as good as this one. Okay, yeah, anyways. Hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.